Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! So, my bio mom passed away in April of this year. I have to say I was glad because it meant I was free from her nonsense finally. My maternal grandparents raised and legally adopted me because bio mom would allow my stepdad to physically and mentally abuse me, and he also tried to use me for free childcare. Well, I hadn't spoken to any of them in about 3 years, and my grandparents have been gone 19 and 10 years respectively. I was at home cooking when I found out she had passed away. One of our employees' brothers was their neighbor, and he called to say he was sorry. I really expected someone to show up at my house at night, but they didn't come. I stayed home the next day in case they came, and they did. I didn't want them verbally assaulting my mother-in-law. So I was sitting on the edge of the bed when my mother-in-law came and said that some man was at the door asking for me. I really expected it to be my bio mother's brother, who is also a narcissist, but it was her husband. I went to the door and told him he wasn't welcome in my home and to leave before I called the police. He sneered at me and said, "I knew you'd show your face even though your mom passed away last night." I told him I knew and didn't care because, as far as I was concerned, my mom passed away 10 years ago. He told me whatever, that he just came to get half of the burial money that I owed. I laughed at him and told him I wasn't giving him anything. Asked him if the children she had with stepdad was paying, and he said no, they couldn't afford it. For reference, my husband and I own a company that has locations in multiple states. He got really angry at this and told me he'd just put my name on paperwork at the funeral home, and then I'd have to pay. I work within a death care industry with a company we own, and I called his bluff. I told him that they wouldn't allow that. He said, "Well, then I'll just take you to small claims court." I told him go for it, and I'll have my attorney present my adoption papers, where both my parents relinquished their rights to me so my grandparents could adopt me. I told him, by the way, the camera to the left of your head is also recording you. And he went nuclear. He told me I owed it to him to help him since I was the reason my grandparents wouldn't have anything to do with the kids he had with his wife. I told him no. They did that because of you and the way you treated me, and it was ultimately their choice. He started spewing more nonsense and I told him to get off my Porsche. He didn't leave until I called the cops and they had him removed from my property. He then put a rant on Facebook about how disrespectful I was. In response, I put up the video up on Facebook. His sister messaged me apologizing, saying he had no idea my grandparents took me because of him. He tried having his attorney contact me, but I won that too. Just as soon as I sent him my adoption papers, he almost couldn't find a funeral home to take her because we work with the local ones and no one wanted his attitude. Almost 6 months later, he still tells everyone I wouldn't help him. So yeah, you start your day with the sound of an excavator demolishing your shed without having a single clue in the world. Why the hell is this happening? I mean, I get it. I've had more than a couple of complaints from the so-called HOA in the past few weeks regarding the renovations I did recently to my shed, since it was a safety hazard and almost collapsed due to getting damaged by the few storms we had in the past couple of years. For all I know, I got all the licenses I need to proceed with rebuilding the shed the way it was. And that's all I did, by the way. Didn't add any extensions to it or anything of that sort, but the crazy HOA president didn't see it that way and insisted that I take it down completely because, obviously, I added more to it and took advantage of the situation and did what I always wanted to do: build a bigger shed. First of all, I had every right to do so on my damn property, cause well, it is my property, and I wasn't violating any rules or bothering any neighbors if I did so. But I didn't. I really didn't. I just renewed the thing because it wasn't safe anymore to keep it in that poor shape. I got visited by many inspectors in the past few weeks due to having complaints from HOA that I had illegal buildings on my property, but it didn't really take them long to know for a fact that these claims were all false, and they would leave eventually without reprimanding me for any violations. Well, as expected. Of course, these pointless visits drove that HOA jerk mad. He wanted a piece of me, that's for sure. And on this day, he came to get it. Somehow he managed to score himself an excavator, and he decided to drive it through my shed and simply take care of this problem himself. Didn't even know that jerk could operate this kind of stuff, but I learned later that at one point, that was a job he had in his younger years. It probably wasn't hard for him to pull some strings and get someone to let him into an excavator they didn't probably own. So yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I woke up to the sound of my newly renovated shed being crushed by this piece of trash, driving an excavator through it without a care in the world. It took me a moment to realize that this was actually happening and on my property nonetheless. And all I could do at that moment is go on autopilot and do exactly what I did next. I went inside my house, grabbed my registered rifle, and came out guns blazing and started shooting at him and that thing without even giving him a single effing warning. The moment he heard shotguns, he stopped immediately, ducked inside the cabin for a moment, then eventually found himself a chance to get the hell out of there and run for his life away from that deadly situation. I would like to say that I wasn't shooting to actually hurt him, but honestly, that would be just plain lies. Maybe 6 or 7 police cruisers arrived on the scene and stopped right in front of my property, had me drop my weapon, then detained me before they asked me a single question. Completely understandable though. But once they heard my side of the story and allowed me to show them the footage my cameras caught, they uncuffed me and had me go grab my registration for my weapon and wanted me to point them to the house of that guy I shot at. And I did. Some of them went in the direction of his house, got him out of there, handcuffed him, and shoved him in the back of one of their cars. Since rebuilding that shit cost me over $7,000, the charge of malicious destruction of property he caught turned out to be a felony in fact, and not a simple misdemeanor. And he ended up getting 5 years in prison, plus a $2,500 fine. And honestly, we're just getting started here. I'm surely suing him for the damages, and he also seems to be under a lot of fire for the excavator he managed to steal with the help of an insider that eventually got caught up in all that crap as well. It just looks awful for him in the long term. As for me, I was treated like a sane man that found himself in a horrible situation and had to use force to defend his property and family from grave harm, and simply did what he had to do with the legal means that was at his disposal. For context, I, female 35, have a son that was born when I was married to my first husband. I was young when he was born, and his father was abusive to me. My ex-husband's mom was constantly in our lives, trying to take over and make my son hers. I left my ex when I was in my early 20s, and my ex-mother-in-law ended up taking my son into another state and filing for custody. She went to a state that has grandparents' rights as ours didn't. I fought with her for years and ended up getting remarried to my current spouse, and we had a son together when I was in my mid-20s, a boy who is now 10. I see my oldest son only during the summer and the holidays. I finally got the court case moved to our local court, and the judge said that I was wronged and ordered shared custody and visitation. My ex-mother-in-law made a huge deal that my son needed to stay with her during the week because of school, and the judge went with it, so he could finish high school in an environment he was familiar with. My ex-mother-in-law has ruined my son, just like she did with her own. She's given him any and everything he's wanted and asked for. She's taught him no respect and kept him very sheltered. She literally jumps on people if they don't give him his way. So in turn, my son is loud, violent, and all around sad to be around. So he came up to visit during Halloween and showed his awful face. My husband's mom lives with us and she isn't well. She's doing chemo. She's been a big help with my youngest son so that I could help my husband with our business. My youngest is a delight to be around. He's polite, funny, and respectful. We've taught him that you don't expect anything unless you work for it. I went and picked my oldest up and his attitude started right away because his phone died, and the charger I had in truck did not fit his phone. He wanted me to get off the interstate and buy him an overpriced one from a truck stop or something. I told him no. I'd get him one when we got into town, and that next time, he needs to remember to bring one for the house and the car. I suggested making a packing list ahead of time. Now my youngest was in the back with his tablet playing quietly, and my oldest realized the tablet was plugged into a car charger. He asked his younger brother for the charger, and I told him it's an Apple charger and it won't work on your Android. My oldest said, "You don't know that. Shut up." Next thing I know, he's forcibly taking the Apple charger and is trying to fit it into his phone. When it didn't work, he threw it into the back seat of the truck. My youngest just plugged his tablet back up without a word, but I told my older son that his behavior wasn't acceptable. Fast forward to the next day. My older son is still fuming at me because I made him wait, badmouthed me to his grandma and so on. I left to go to the office as did my husband, and my mother-in-law was going to take my youngest son to the treat trail of Halloween. She asked my older if he wanted to go and he told her to kick rocks. My husband told him not to speak to her like that, and I knew trouble was brewing. I just didn't know how bad. Apparently, mother-in-law and younger son went to the treat trail, and my older called mother-in-law to tell her that he wanted Hardee's, also known as Carl's Jr. My mother-in-law told him there was food at home and that it would be a while before she could get it. My older son told her she needed to bring it now. My mother-in-law told him to either eat what was at the house or wait, and he cussed her and hung up on her. Mother-in-law called me and I told her not to reward his bad behavior. I told her we had plans to go out anyway later to eat. He could wait. So when mother-in-law gets home, she tries to open the door and her key won't work. My older son comes to the door and tells her that he's angry and doesn't want her in the house, so he locked her out. He told her to wait outside until he either felt like opening the door or until I came back home. And my mother-in-law told him to open the door as soon as possible. She called me crying and I went the hell off. I called my older son and told him that he didn't make the rules in my house. He went by them and that he will be punished if he didn't open that door. He really thought I was playing. I left the office and I went home. Cue disaster. I opened the door and my older son was there on the other side. Mother-in-law and my younger son had been waiting in her car, and my older son was blocking the threshold, saying he told mother-in-law to keep outside and that it was her punishment for telling him no. I told him to move now. I tried to push past him and he pushed me back outside, threatening to lock us all out. I went inside again and he put his hand on my face and pushed me back out. I told him that's it. I am calling the police. He didn't think I was serious, but I did it. I told the dispatcher that my older son was refusing to let me into my own home and had put his hands on me. My older son goes into a rage, and I mean a pure rage. And he comes out of the door screaming profanity and threats, tries to take my phone, and the lady tells me she will send someone as soon as possible. I mean, I had to literally fight him to keep him from breaking my phone. Then he goes after my youngest son. He tells him that he hates him and he is going to kill him because my younger son caused his life to be awful since he was born, and that my older son should be the only one getting anything from me. My older son said he was my true son since he was born first and from my first marriage. I don't know, ex-mother-in-law's nonsense. My mother-in-law locks my younger son in her car, and my older one proceeds to kick, punch, and crack the windows and windshield in her car. My older son goes after my mother-in-law just as my husband pulls up. He's telling my mother-in-law that this is her fault, that she just needed to do what he said, and my husband just tries to restrain him, and he is screaming he will have my husband arrested and so on. The police come and they immediately take over, restrain my older son and put him in the back of the van. My husband and I explained the situation, and I told the officer that my ex-mother-in-law had shared custody. So the officer calls the ex-mother-in-law and tells her what's happening. He puts her on speaker and she immediately puts the blame on us, saying we provoked him and are abusive to him. The officer told her that didn't seem to be the case, as a neighbor had come forward and said she had called 911 also, plus had a security camera that showed the entire thing. Ex-mother-in-law jumps to saying the police here can't do anything with the older son as he's a resident of another state, and blah blah blah. The cop tells the ex-mother-in-law that that's not the case, and it seems like the older son needs to learn he's not in control. The officer hangs up and the ex-mother-in-law immediately calls me. I put her on speakerphone. She's not the smartest, yet she thinks she is. Ex-mother-in-law said that if I had my older son arrested, then I would be a bad mom, and that he was justified in what he said and done. I asked her about the true son thing, and she said he was my only heir as he was my first son and from my first marriage, and divorce is a sin. I told her that's not how it works. I told her I'm tired of him taking my home over and trying to hurt other people. Long story short, he spent 3 days in juvenile lockup before a hearing, and the judge asked me what I wanted to do. So my older son is being sent to a group home. My ex-mother-in-law fought the entire way but had no hold because both officers and my neighbor gave statements. Okay, so here is a recent update. I had a meeting with his in-house therapist this morning, and the therapist and group home admin suggested sending him to a therapeutic foster home or a one-on-one psych unit as he's just too much for them to try and rein in. He's made sexual and physical threats to female staff and just been defying everyone. Even though my ex-husband signed his rights over to his mom, my ex-mother-in-law tried contacting him, and my ex and his wife told him to never call again, that they don't want my older son around their girls because he's been violent towards them in the past. The in-house therapist said the older son needs more help than she can give him, and he seems to undermine her because she is a she. He has a true disrespect for women. I tried talking to him before I left, and he said again, if I didn't tell them that I lied, then he'd not speak to me. I told him if that's what you want, but you aren't coming home. He said to me in front of everyone that he was coming home and we'd all be punished for this when he did, and I told him that's not gonna happen. Older son said if I took him home today, then my punishment might not be as severe. I told him he's not doing anything to me. He said, we will see which, and I walked away. The problem with a therapeutic home is nobody in our area is willing to take him due to how violent he is. And if he goes to a psych ward, he will be locked down 23 hours a day. My older son is also trying to put this on my spouse, saying his stepfather is to blame, and if the courts would make my husband leave, my older son's behavior would change. That is not true. He's just trying to cause more problems. I told him my spouse has had very limited interaction with my older son and has had no disciplinary action towards him. The GH gave me the older son phone, shoes and other personal belongings. I went through the text on his ex-mother-in-law after my husband did some sort of magic to unlock the phone. And my older son jokes with my ex-mother-in-law about killing me, how he deserves to have my home to himself, and how his little brother is an abomination. Because my younger son's father is my second husband. The phone is a prepaid phone, so I'm going to deactivate it and put it away in case I need it for evidence. I texted my ex-mother-in-law and told her that I had his phone and would be keeping it at the next messages. She went nuclear powered because she knows she's busted. She started saying things about my deceased father and trying to deflect the blame. I can't wait to see what lies she comes up with now. I'll know in a few days what the plan is, whether they can find someone to take him or if he's going to a lockdown unit. The judge said he can't come back to my house because the courts fear for the safety of my younger child, and the CPS is also involved now, and the CPS worker asked if I'd be willing to sign my older sons over to the state completely. And I said, absolutely not. Thank you for watching and see you next time.